okay, let's kick off. So welcome, everyone, warm welcome, literally, to our second AI assurance roundtable. Why is the second one? John will enlighten you in a minute. Thank you also as first for the host, the ICO, and the Informatics Association for making that possible and having, I think, an adequate venue to running this event, this roundtable. Briefly, why do we have that? When the internet came up, I think there were no push towards regulation, and when AI is coming up, like having this rise, there is a push towards assurance or regulation. I think this brings us all together. And to myself, I'm Torsten Jelinek. I'm running a consultancy and digital service firm, DPG, and I'm very grateful to actually co-organize with the Global Digital Foundation. I would just hand over first to John Higgins, who used to be the president of BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. He used to be the Director General of Digital Europe and is behind, actually, of course, with the team, to set up the AI Assurance Club, what we're having today. And I will just pass over to you, and then we will make the round, the tour de table.
Okay, well, I'll just introduce myself then, John Higgins. Do you want to do the tour de table?
Yeah.
So please, to my right, introduce yourself, sir.
All right, let me start then. My name is Hans Uskoreit. I've worked for more than 30 years in AI. Now you may think this is boring for such a long time, and even before AI became fashionable. But I made it more pleasurable by working in large companies, early on at IBM. The latest, I was 3 years chief AI advisor for Lenovo in Beijing. And I worked in small companies, so I founded a couple myself. I just recently, last month, sold the last startup. And I'm now working on the board of directors of the mother company. And I worked for many years in research. I was head of the DFKI in Berlin. I built this up, the German Research Center for AI in Berlin. I was professor at the university, and I did a couple of other things to make the boring AI more pleasurable and more diverse.
Okay, so hi everybody, I'm Rob Wortham. I'm the guy who's been sending you all the emails and organising all of this. So I'm the Director AI at the Global Digital Foundation. I am also an academic at the University of Bath in the UK, where I teach and run the programme on robotics and autonomous systems, and with a special interest in the action selection, how machines choose what to do next, given their current context, and their built-in goals. So that's really my kind of research area, and I did quite a lot of work with transparency as part of my PhD. So it's great to see you all here today. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Roland Norden. I work for the Robert Bosch GmbH. I've been there for, I must say, 20 years already. So I had a lot of positions and rather came from the classic product development, a lot of e-mobility I did. And in 2017, I joined the Bosch Center for Artificial Intelligence, where I'm responsible for validation and verification of AI. Okay, thank you.
My name is Catherine Boyd. I'm from Norway. I'm moving now to Berlin. I have my own consultancy company in AI ethics called Boyd Consulting. Some of my former customers are the biggest bank in the Nordics and Cisco. I'm also on the Norwegian Council for Digital Ethics. I'm a part of IEEE initiative to open an AI security research center. And I just got a part-time job offer today as a researcher at Charité, research hospital in Lyon.
I'm Leonard, so originally came from Nokia, and now working for Huawei. I'm a kind of a Nokia fellow, and Bellabs fellow, actually on AI. So that was my kind of continuation of actually going to research into AI area and the systems. I'm working as a chief AI expert in Huawei. I was a member of this high-level expert group in AI that was building the concept of trustworthy AI for the EU and to a certain extent the regulation AI. Forward one. My role in Huawei is to figure out what is the kind of key messages on AI and how we actually make the AI work with the environment and with the society in a good way. So always when you bring in certain kind of capabilities to society, they also have a feedback. And this kind of interaction between the new capabilities and then the reaction from the society is something where the kind of on that ethics of AI in a very let's say significant way. This is the interest about how to smooth the way that we actually can pave the way for good AI that is implementable in a way that doesn't actually make too much damage, drops, holes the structure of our society.
Thank you. Before Pat says his thing, can I just say to the people who are online, I think as we are a reasonably small number, we don't have that many people online, maybe the people online could do a quick intro as well. So we'll finish going around these people. It gives you a bit of a chance to think about what you're going to say. And then I'll go down just in the order in which I have people on this Zoom list, which is no particular order at all, but that's probably the best thing. And I've got Krishna first. So when we get to online, then Krishna will be first. So, sorry, Pat, after you.
Yeah, so Pat McCarthy, I'm a consultant with a company in Ireland called Manitoba. I'm basically AI security and data governance advisor. I advise the Irish National Centre for Data Analytics and the Governance Board. I'm advising Evalry, which is an autonomous mobility startup, and I'm also advising Huawei Cybersecurity Centre in Brussels. And helping out John.
Riga Barman, I'm work in various management positions in telecommunication and IT. And nowadays I run my own consulting practice for startup companies mainly, and also mid-sized IT companies.
Hi, my name is Nikolaus Becker from Gesellschaft für Informatik, the German Informatics Society, where I'm heading the public policy team. And for the past years, I've been PI at a research project we conducted for the German Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs on AI testing and auditing. Yeah, so I'm really interested in your work, and thanks again for the invitation. And also, please excuse that Daniel, our director, couldn't make it today.
Well, shall we? I did already.
Okay, yes, you did. So sorry. So Krishna, would you like to just introduce yourself? Say a couple of words.
Sure. I'm Krishna. I am the co-founder and CTO of Kansai Technologies GmbH, located in Munich, Germany. And so I've had 20 years of experience in AI. And the last 10 years, I've mainly focused on explainable AI. I started my career in explainable AI with working with the DARPA project together with Stanford Research University of Maryland and University of Leeds. And then after this, I joined Continental, where also I worked on combining the first generation and the second generation of AI, which is the knowledge AI and the data AI respectively. And 2 years back, started Kansai Technologies. And here we are creating one-of-a-kind explainable AI solution for the construction industry, the one that combines both neural AI and symbolic AI, and we're creating this neuro-symbolic AI. It's an AI that does not just predict output, but explains and understands when it's learning. So we're creating this AI and scaling it across thousands of sites in the construction sector. So that's what I'm currently doing, and that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years. So really pleased to meet you all.
Thank you very much. And then Katrina, do you want to just say a couple of words?
Good afternoon. I'm Katrina Gray. I'm with the Global Digital Foundation. I'm a researcher working with Rob. I'm also a PhD candidate at the University of Bath at the Centre for Accountable, Responsible and Transparent AI. I'm joining from London this afternoon. And yeah, great to see everyone and really looking forward to hearing the discussion.
Thank you. Okay. And Then Emanuela.
Sorry,
okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, a little bit faint, but we can hear you, yes.
Okay, sorry, because I'm driving. I'm going to be in the office in 10 minutes and then I can connect via the PC. Hi, everybody. I'm Emanuela Girardi. I'm from Italy. I am the founder of the association POP-AI, Popular Artificial Intelligence, and I'm sitting in the board of ADRA, the AI Data and Robotics Association, and I'm in the advisory board of CLAIRE, the Confederation of Laboratories for Artificial Intelligence Research in Europe. And I'm part of the team who built the National AI Italian strategy. I'm sorry, I hope you could hear me because I'm...
Yeah, that's perfect. That's brilliant.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay.
Very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Enrico.
Hello, thank you, Rob. I'm Enrico Panay. I'm an AI ethicist, basically a philosopher. I do consulting in AI ethics and teach responsible AI for the Emilian Business School in Paris. And actually, I'm a co-convener of the ADO Group 6 at GTC 21 on AI enhanced nudging.
Lovely, thank you. Could we have Lampros next?
Oh, hello, everyone. Thank you, Rob. It's been really nice to meet you all. I'm a professor of AI and data science at the University of The Hague of Applied Sciences. I'm actually calling from The Hague today. And I also hold a UNESCO chair in AI and data science for society. And my interests are to do with the applications of AI and data science for health and social innovation in particular, also, the main focus of addressing the strategic development goals of the United Nations. And I'm also involved in recent initiatives to do with AI regulation in Europe and UNESCO as well.
Lovely, thank you. Paul McDonald.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Paul Nemitz. I'm the principal advisor in the European Commission of DG Justice. And I have written an article in 2018 which makes people understand why we have moved in the European Union from AI ethics to law on AI regulation. The article is called Constitutional Democracy and Technology in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. It's on the website of the Royal Society in the UK, downloaded by now more than 30,000 times. It's basically, externalizing our internal thinking, which led to the proposal on an AI regulation.
Thank you. And our own Paul McDonald?
Yeah, I'm co-founder of Global Digital Foundation with John Higgins. Formerly, I was head of the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation in Brussels. I work day to day as a policy analyst and have a particular interest in AI. Wrote a paper on it about a year ago, questioning whether we can regulate it ex ante for social outcomes.
Lovely, thank you. And Toju, could you just introduce yourself? Thank you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Toju, based in London. I work as a program manager on Responsible AI at Google, and I also lead Women in AI. It's a not-for-profit organization, and I lead the UK branch as well.
Lovely, thank you very much. And I think that covers everybody. Has anybody not been introduced? Perfect, thank you. Lovely, so that was just the introduction, and I'll shut up and I'll leave things to you, Tom.
That's perfect, thank you, Robin. Thanks everyone for the introduction. So I don't want to hold us back for the first intervention. John, do you want to first give a little bit of context why we're here?
Yes,
today?
Of course. So good afternoon, everybody. 7 or 8 years ago, the European Commission asked me to lead a project for them, which was called the Strategic Policy Forum on Digital Enterprise. And it was looking at how Europe could use digital technologies to transform its industrial base. So we looked particularly at industries, but it also included social enterprise. And this was a very big project. funded by DG Grow, but with the support of DG Connect. And we had, throughout the life of this, about a 3-year program, lots of support from the consultancy. So we had, quite a big spend on Deloitte, EY, KPI. I think we had all of them actually. So we had quite a big program. We must have gathered together 30 or 40 people from around Europe, public sector, private sector, third sector. It was a very, very good piece of work. And interestingly, some of the programs that it proposed, I'm still engaged with today. The European Intelligent Cities Challenge with 100 cities in Europe is a spin-off from that piece of work. And to my mind, the latest technology that is a useful tool in this transformation of Europe, and of course not just industrial based, but it's society as well, it's public services and individuals. The latest tool is AI. The latest tool that's got sort of all the focus is AI. But frankly, from my point of view, it's just the latest tool. And it's still a tool that, if we use it well, can transform Europe's economy, can transform Europe's society. And of course, at the time, the zeitgeist around talking in the Commission was, why don't we have our own Google? Why don't we have our own strong supply side in tech? And then there was a gradual realization, actually, a lot of the rewards for Europe could come from not only creating a strong supply industry, which it continues to do through investing in R&D and skills and so on, but actually through the transformation of its traditional industries, the train companies, the Siemens of this world, the car industry, by making them more efficient, globally competitive. So that was the real focus. And it was interesting to see in the preamble to the AI regulation a comment that trust and confidence in AI is holding back the adoption of AI in Europe. There was no evidence at that point to support that assertion, but nevertheless we can all believe that that might be the case, that trust and confidence, whether that's business trust or consumer trust, it holds back. When we looked at this over the years, we thought, well, yes, but how do you demonstrate that trust? How do you create that trust? You have to demonstrate it. You can't just say, well, we comply. We have to demonstrate that we comply with whatever it is, the social norms, the regulation, and so on. And then about a year ago, we started looking at, well, if I'm going to demonstrate compliance in the social norms or regulation, I need to be confident that my value chain does, because I might be getting data sets from here, algorithms from there. How do I know? How will I actually know? Because I'm going to put my neck on the line and say, I comply. But as in aerospace or defense or any of the other industries with sophisticated supply chains, you need to be confident that the people in your supply chain comply as well. Actually, when we explored this concept a little bit further, we found that it is actually a bit too early to be talking about compliance, because many companies didn't know what they were going to be complying with. They didn't quite understand what the social norms were going to be, and they didn't understand what the regulatory environment was going to be, because, understandably, it's still developing. And we'll hear from Paul Nemitz, I think, in a moment, the state of play of the European thinking on AI regulation in the form of the EU AI Act. Anyway, in order to explore this further and to start to help people understand what the state of play was, we decided to form something called the AI Assurance Club. And its purpose is to bring people together from that AI assurance ecosystem, if you will, to help understand what the current state of play is, with a view to practically developing and implementing practical things that will help companies comply and therefore demonstrate that trust and confidence. So that's its purpose. It has, I might describe it as having a global view, but with European roots, given Paul and Rob and my background, very much European roots. Now, what we found in London, a couple of things. If you think about the sort of scale of, okay, well, how are we doing with this demonstrating compliance in such a way as to give trust and confidence? How are we doing? Well, I would say there were two things on the plus side of the scale that I thought came out of London. One was the development of the beginnings of a market in AI assurance services. So we had presentations from companies who were actually providing these assurance services to the market. So I'll give you an example of one. Holistic AI They have actually a software-based solution that and I think they talked openly about the fact they were working with Unilever. So Unilever came to them, and this company provided a mechanism for giving them back some certification, some assurance about their AI. You know, like the tip, yes, your AI is transparent. It does use, it's not biased, you know, so quite what they were basing that on, we weren't really clear. But nevertheless, it was a good signal that assurance services are beginning to develop. And we have a lot of interest already in our club from EY, KPMG, Deloitte, and so on, because they are all developing assurance services for their clients. So the assurance service market is developing. I thought that was a good sign. The other thing is that the UK government, as ever, it focuses on developing a market. So I would say its assurance roadmap is largely bringing the ecosystem together to develop a thriving market and ecosystem, rather than focusing on the regulations. So they focus more on developing an ecosystem. So I think those are plus things on the side of developing this mechanism where you can provide assurance. But on the negative side, I would say I was quite surprised how in flux, I can put it, standards, the underpinning standards were. So we have the CEN-CENIL, you know, the traditional standards body that in Europe usually underpins regulation, developing standards, slowly, but developing standards. Then we have ETSI developing its own thinking on standards, but we also have crowdsourced standards being developed from an organization called For Humanity, which is based in Boston. It's got hundreds, if not thousands of people developing now a standards template that they then take back to government and say, how about using this as the benchmark against which to measure? And they're doing a very good job with GDPR, and there's every reason to believe they'll do a very good job with AI. So I'm just come to the conclusion. So there's pluses and minuses. I thought my conclusion from London, there were more variables and more things in motion than I had quite realised. You know, we're not as far down the track as I sort of hoped we were. So it seemed to me even more important that the club brings together people who are involved in different aspects of this in order to help understand what's going on so that we can progress more quickly to practical solutions. Now, the particular focus that I hope we will have a little bit more of one other thing on the downside, which I think Hans is going to maybe expand on a little bit. One other thing on the downscale, I think there's far from universal acceptance that there needs to be horizontal regulation of AI. So, Paul, you may have done a great job in your document, but I think in the industry, and I'm not talking about among the hyperscalers, I'm talking about people doing like real stuff every day in the marketplace. In hard things, I'm not convinced there needs to be AI regulation in this horizontal way. I don't think that argument has been won. And I think there's a strong sense that we need to continue to regulate the things that we've always regulated, like public safety, security, and outcomes, and not the nuts and bolts of this thing meet a certain standard. So I don't think that argument has been won by any means. Now, it might be that it doesn't matter because it can come anyway, and we might, have to accept that might be the case. But I think there's a lot of work to do to win over the grassroots AI community, if I can call it that, as to that this is worthwhile. And I stress again, I'm not talking about just pushback from the hyperscalers, I mean the grassroots. So that's on the negative side as well. So the club brings together, to my mind, all the people who are engaged in this activity. And what I'm particularly hoping we'll get a bit more of an insight in today, and I know with Hans, he'll take us off in, certainly it will give us more insights here, is, well, what is happening from the perspective of people who are deeply engaged in the development and deployment of AI for practical purposes today. So that's what I hope is out to be, a better understanding of where we are, seeing this from a German industry 4.0, but also very much at the heart of European thinking. So that's my ambition today, Torsten, and that's a little bit about the history of how we got to where we are.
Yeah, thank you, John. I think there's a clear mandate for the Digital Assurance Club to do its work. And we have 5 interventions. The first one is Hans, and I think Hans will bring us to, if you want to assure something, there needs to be something that needs to be assured. And that's probably the question. And I think from my side, it's always very refreshing to see how actually AI in enterprises is emerging, is rising. And I think that's maybe from a European or German perspective, the substance also what needs to be assured. So I would just hand over to you, Hans.
Thank you.
And please enlighten us.
Thank you.
Where it's going.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we should ask ourselves, are we in a position here in Europe to think that we can influence now the future of AI very much, since all the comparisons of AI in China and the US and Europe clearly indicate that the leading powers are in the United States and maybe in China, where I work, and not so much in Europe. So how do we dare to say that we want to have a say in here? Now, if you look a little more closely at the development, and actually I did, because I did lots of comparisons along several dimensions between of the artificial intelligence in United States and China and Europe. It turns out that, first of all, there are different dimensions. Who is leading in research, who is leading in uptake, who in penetration of the society, in the new algorithms, and so on. So there are lots of dimensions, and it's not exactly clear that United States is leading in all of them, and it's not clear that China is. It's actually quite different. Yeah? So along some of these dimensions, clearly the United States is seen up front by almost everybody, especially when it comes to the strongest earth-shaking applications for the end consumer market. Yeah? So internet, e-commerce, electronics, consumer electronics, that's clearly something where we are very weak in Europe, because we've given up these fields even before AI ever was talked about. Yeah? We gave up too early. So then there are other things where China is seen up front. In data sometimes, yeah, some of the people who work on it clearly say that there is the strength is massive data. Everybody would have guessed that, and maybe an enthusiastic uptake of the society. Yeah? You don't get the skeptical behavior that we see here in Germany and in the rest of Europe. So people are really eager. They say, "Oh, it's AI, then let me try it." Yeah, so not say, "Oh, what do for me?" So it's quite different. And the AI people are pop stars in China, yeah, so everybody knows them. They are like so. But then also another difference is in the areas. I already indicated in internet AI, e-commerce, and consumer services, consumer electronics, and so on. It may not be Europe, but the big and now emerging big field is enterprise AI. It's really enterprise AI because, and it's true, the enterprises are slower than the end consumers adopting it. And there are maybe reasons, yeah, that John already indicated. So much of the AI market will be in processes and products of companies. Yeah? It will be embedded, and the magic formula is AI plus X or X plus AI, because in those areas, it's rarely AI seen as a standalone. Yeah? It's not that I sell you now a brand new product and it's all AI. No, AI is embedded in systems that do business analytics, in systems that do quality control, supply chain management, supplier risk reduction, and so on. Thousands and thousands of possibilities, but usually AI embedded or connected with other things. Yeah? That makes it very hard. That makes it also very hard to regulate, yeah? And that makes it very hard to impose the right restrictions. Sometimes it's embedded with things in new business models, sometimes in existing business models. And but this is a big field, and this year's Gartner 12 trends contain not only the usual suspects like the new version of data warehouse and data lake, and so now it's the next generation. So we all know that. But it's very interesting. A central place is decision intelligence. It's called decision intelligence. And that is really the core of enterprise processes. That's because enterprise processes make decisions on the low level all the way up to the C-suite. And the question is now, Can those be taken over fully automatically by AI? In some cases, yes, in others not. How will the interaction be between the human decision makers? Clearly, if we put an AI and train it by all the decisions that a CEO makes, guess, can it substitute the CEO? No, why not? Because there are new situations. Yeah, the thing is trained on the past, but the next generation is done today in the present. Yeah, and things have changed around. We live in a highly dynamic world, and the AI is trained on the past. They are not good. So it will be for a long time a cooperation between human decision making and artificial. But on the other hand, can the decision maker now, let's say the CEO, can he get all the data in the world that are, because it's based on change, yeah? Adaptation, evolution is based on change, on reacting to change. Can the CEO really observe all the change in the own company, in the market, in the regulation, among the customers, among the technologies and so on? No, no way. So in the end, it will be a symbiosis on all levels between AI and human decision making, because this way we will not get superhuman performance, but we will get super AI performance, because things will be better than the best AI as well. So, but now, coming back now, it's clear that enterprises have much higher standards when it comes to safety, reliability, accountability than some of the end consumer applications. If I get the wrong song recommended, bad luck, and if I buy the wrong thing from Amazon, okay, I send it back. That's not a big deal. But if something goes wrong in my processes, yeah, if something goes wrong, I'm selling to my customer company something that behaves in unforeseen ways and creates lots of damage. The question is who comes up with the damage, who does, and so on. So it's pretty clear there is a need for some companies want more safety, more security. At the same time, they are afraid that they may drown in the overload, yeah, because, you know, our political systems tend to create safety in such a way that it becomes highly expensive. Yeah? You need then whole new departments to deal with a new regulation, certifications and so on. So, and there's one more, and then I will shut up, but there's one more problem, and this is the following. If the regulation and the standardization is meant not to apply only to the function, but make some mention, yeah, of the technology, somehow goes somewhere in the technology. You could encapsulate the technology and say, we only say what's the end product. Yeah? Actually, that's done in other areas. If you get a little pump, the criteria it has to fulfill, yeah, for certification differ depending on whether you put the pump in an airplane, in a submarine, in a lawnmower, and so on. It could be the same pump or similar technology, but depending on where I apply it, the criteria for certification and for using it, for testing it, for allowing it are completely different. So this will be one thing in AI too. So we need to look at the use cases, at the use and the damage it can cause, not so much at the technology. Also, we don't know what comes tomorrow. I'll give you an example of transparent AI. There are at least 3 different traditions, 3 different ways of making AI more transparent. You can do it in the neural models themselves. You can have some outside system that does it. That makes it transparent. You can embed knowledge, there's even 4, and then you can measure this thing, and you can do it by closer training, post-training. You train, you have a loop of testing, training, and retraining, and in the end, the probability, never security, probability of the AI of misbehaving goes so deep down that any human would be more likely to make a mistake than the AI. That's the situation we want to get to. So transparency and looking at things can take different. So do we know what transparency creating methods we will have tomorrow? No, nobody. Not even the best people in our field can. So will the law still be there next year? Yeah, because it will take 1 year until it's passed. It will be there in 5 years. So, but then the things has changed. So this makes the task completely different. So I like the idea very much, and then my last statement, I like the idea very much for concerned people from different sides, from people who apply, who create technology products and who use AI in their processes, for people who develop the knowledge to consult others in this area, for the top-level researchers in applied research close to products, to come together and sit together and see, communicate very much how to not only influence tomorrow's legislation, because today's legislation will be adapted in no time, that's pretty clear, but also come together to see how we deal with the things that have not been legislated, but where we need more security, transparency, accountability, and so on. But also how to deal with legislation, how to make it usable, how to put it into processes that don't make our company bankrupt, because they are too expensive. So we need to get together, and that requires new methods and new technology. Some of the certification and testing process need to be supported by technology again. So there's lots of issues involved, and there couldn't be enough conversation on it. You just need to make sure, I would say, in this club, the club can only work if you have the right groups of stakeholders represented sufficiently. Otherwise, it will fold. You need the people who sell AI to others, enterprise AI, who use the AI, who do the next generation work on the next generation, who test it, who certify it, who observe. And unless you have all these stakeholders somehow in your club, then rather spend your time with something. So, sorry, that was all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hans. I think later we have Roland from Bosch, might be also quite complementing what you say, what an industry can do or applies AI and what assurance means. But I think let's go first to the other side, the table. I don't want to polarize, but we have Paul Nemitz, I hope, still in the Zoom call. So he can't make it today. He's, I think, in Brussels. And Paul, as he introduced himself, is the principal advisor to the EU Commission, has been strongly involved in the AI Act proposal, and might have a little bit of different view, I guess. And I think we have, the right stakeholders today to have that conversation. And when we go through Paul and the other interventions, we will open up then for the cross-table debate. I think that will be quite exciting. Paul, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're in the car.
Yes, I'm in the car. So thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss. And I don't have a very much opposing view. I think we are dealing with a very difficult cutting-edge issue, by the way, not only on the AI Act, but all the different pieces, and there are more than 10 of legislation on the digital and the internet are difficult. And so it's very important, as the previous speaker said, to bring together all those who know something about these things. And I would even say the legislative negotiation process, which now starts on the AI Act in the European Parliament and in the Council, is not only about positions in terms of member states' positions or political positions. It's really a finding process to come up with the right solution. And let me answer the question which has been posed in the title of my presentation, namely posed by you, namely, why is this regulation not anti-innovation and anti-competitive? So let me say, first of all, we are doing one piece of law for all of the European Union. If we wouldn't do this, we would very soon have 27 pieces of law. There's an itch in many member states. I've been myself appointed by the German government, the cabinet of Angela Merkel at the time, into the Data Ethics Commission in Germany. It was very clear that Germany will move on something in this area. If the EU doesn't move, that's why the Data Ethics Commission was called together. By the way, it was a group having all stakeholders in it. The president of the DFKI, the German Institute of Artificial Intelligence, Professor Walzer was there, then the head of the German Industry Association, also the head of the Consumer Association. So a very German effort to bring all sides together. And I think the outcomes were good. So, and they are inspiring the AI Act on the EU level. So back to the question, is this anti-innovation and anti-competitiveness? I think this is very old thinking, that legislation is not good for innovation and competitiveness. I will try to give you a little bit the counter thesis. So first, as I said, would you like it better if there are 27 pieces of law plus the UK 28? And then, of course, in the United States, maybe similar laws on state level, because Washington never gets its act together on legislation. So the move in the United States on data protection and other digital issues is state law. I would say, let's just stop the cheap propaganda against Brussels, and let's recognize one piece of law is better for business than 27 because it creates a level playing field. The second, I think the process in Brussels is a process which is very discursive, which tries to include, like in this roundtable, all stakeholders, and they are being heard. And so you can see that the legislation proposed to be, make it simple, is not proposing any new substantive obligations. What the law is about is to make sure through documentation and process obligations that other laws which already exist are complied with, and that this is properly documented. So it raises certainly on the high risk and type of AI, and the legislation differentiates between 4 types of AI, namely the very few types of AI which are forbidden, then high risk, medium risk, and no risk or low risk. It differentiates the intensity of these process and documentation obligations according to the level of risk of the AI in question. And how to calibrate this, of course, we will quarrel, and many businesses will try to get their products into the lower category, and this is the good fight of politics and interests. But I think from an intellectual point of view, I think it's an approach which makes sense because it's an expression of proportionality. And it applies a tried and tested methodology of technology regulation by law, which we already have in the European Union, in the sense that it basically takes over the self-certification processes, which we have also in other pieces of technology legislation. But, and that is the daring part of it, the experience which we have is always only related to safety, in terms of safety of people, physical safety, maybe environmental safety. But now we are entering a field, and I think that is important for the technological intelligentsia, namely you, to realize. We're entering a field of technology which, as the previous speaker said, is a decision technology. And these decisions can have many impacts on humans which go beyond the classical safety issues. They can have impacts relating to fundamental rights, and I'm not talking only about discrimination, but there are many other fundamental rights which can be touched on, and they can have an impact on the good functioning of democracy. And so this is the new challenge of AI, that technology enters the realm of something which previously was reserved to humans, namely thinking, reflection, decision-making, and decision preparation, both on an individual level and a collective level. And I think it is good that democracy takes charge of this. Let me also be very clear. The experience with the internet is that if you leave such an important part of life and of society outside the scope of democratic law, you run into a lot of problems in democratic societies. So if our common goal is that democracy thrives, and I think it's very important that we now show that this is happening in the wake of the Russian attack on the Ukraine, and actually also the many other attacks on democracy, which we see also inside the European Union, inside the United States, in the UK, and so on. Efforts to have government by executive only, and people like Orban, who make sure that they will stay in power eternally by disabling democratic processes. I think if our aim is to keep democracy strong, we should stop down talking the law, as a law is the most noble expression of democracy. And I think engineers and the technology scene don't do themselves a favor if they go down this route. It is a completely other matter to discuss about the content of laws and to make sure that the law gets things right in terms of serving its objectives best, namely the public policy objective, while being proportional and as effective and efficient as possible, namely also keeping the costs down. I think that is a different discussion, and that is a very legitimate discussion, at least in some parts, not, of course, where the costs are driven down at public policy. So I would say now coming to the question.
Paul, you're a little bit, we can't hear you now, Paul.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just to finish with a thought on how this group can contribute. I think, once this group has recognized that we all share some public policy goals, like, ensuring the good functioning of democracy, making sure that people get their fundamental rights respected, that technology doesn't undermine these great achievements of Western democracy, then I think our work should focus exactly on what you said at the outset, namely, how is this going to work in terms of how do we get the technologists and the engineers to do the right thing? And I would immediately agree with you that there is a huge scope out there for concretization, because, of course, the parliamentary law is not a handbook for engineers. The parliamentary law gives the basic orientation within which then there are many processes and many technological solutions possible to reach those goals set by the legislator. And as we now have a proposal, we can see more or less where things are going. My prediction is, as usual in the council, member states will try to reduce the level of protection of the law. Parliament will try to up it. The compromise will be more or less where the Commission proposal is. I don't think there will be radical, substantial changes. No signs of that on the horizon. So I think it is possible now to start work on operationalization, and I have no problem with a market being created which offers a number of operationalization for different areas of requirements and of compliance requirements. And it may well be that a number of different types of operationalization ways, technological operationalization, process and organizational operationalizations, that they all fit within the law and that they compete with each other. In the same way that law firms compete with each other in giving good advice about what a law means, and consultancies compete on process advice. So I'm very happy to be part of this group. I hope it will be constructive work. I hope this group doesn't degenerate into a group which is just lobbying against legislation. Then I would say goodbye and wish you good luck. If this group is a group which tries to do what we need, namely to concretize how we make sure that within the law to be expected to be adopted next year, the processes make sense in terms of pursuing public policy, legitimate public policy objectives, I've described them, while keeping the costs down and also creating a competitive market on how to do it actually, then I think this group will be a real contribution. And as a practical matter, I think maybe we should invite the people who are already doing this in concreto. I know at least 3 or 4 processes already going on in the IEEE, in CENELEC, for humanity, Roberto Zicari, professor at Frankfurt University with his Z inspection. There are many who are trying to do this work in an anticipatory way. And maybe there are companies who want to prepare themselves and even maybe want to be in front of the market, because I wouldn't exclude that an AI which respects all the rights which people expect to be respected, you know, that can be a competitive advantage. In the same way that Microsoft today says we give GDPR rights to our customers worldwide, I hope we have industry in the room who realizes that making sure that they don't put out an AI which undermines individual rights, or, you know, a bot which starts to be a neo-Nazi bot, as we have seen it with the Microsoft bot. You know, if people take charge, I think it will be actually also good marketing for them, at least in terms of showing that they are good corporate citizens of democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul, for this very energetic speech. And we take it as a mandate for the AI Assurance Club, actually, to have that conversation. And I think it's clear that the club is not a lobbying organization which wants to criticize the act proposal. On the contrary, it is to invite, to convene the people, to bring actually in a democratic process, a multi-stakeholder dialogue into the room or online. And with that, I would like to immediately pass on to Patrick, Professor Glauner, and thank you, Toju, for waiting a little bit longer, because Patrick, he has a lot of students he needs to supervise today, and so he can't be here, and he has to, it's great, he has to finish at 5 sharp, so we gain some time, Patrick. I think Paul Patrick has, I think, a little bit different nuanced view on that, Patrick, it's all your floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Torsten. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Unfortunately, I need to leave at 5 because today my students are presenting their final projects in their computer vision class, which takes all day because we have about 100 students taking the course. So I have advised the German parliament, the French parliament, and the Luxembourgish parliament as an expert witness on the AI Act. Obviously, there are legal questions and legal problems around AI, and the AI Act is one attempt to address them. But the AI Act works in a horizontal way and tries to cover all sorts of use cases with very, very broad and largely non-specific language. Yes, there is a classification about what's high risk and what's forbidden. Unfortunately, almost every use case that you can think about is high risk because you can get a damage from almost any use case. You can get a mental damage by doing a Google search. So your Google search will be high risk suddenly. It's good that certain use cases would be forbidden, like social scoring, but that should be forbidden not only related to AI, it should be forbidden in any way. And that's why I don't think this horizontal approach really works. Wherever there is a real risk to health and safety, like you want to build a nuclear power plant, a car, an airplane, there is vertical regulation already. And that is about systems that impact us. And maybe we need to, amend some vertical regulation, AI specifically, or add some vertical regulation, like around chatbots, whatever, but we should never really address the tool. AI is just a tool. We should address the use case and a system that has a certain impact and not just an implementation, because an AI is always just a tiny piece of any larger software or hardware system. The question is also, what is actually AI? I think every computer or every AI professor disagrees with others what's actually AI, because there are huge overlaps with other fields. And the AI Act is extremely broad, and it's in fact not an AI Act, it's a software act. So I think the AI Act will mainly just stifle innovation because of this very large or this extremely non-specific language. The whole topic of governance is impossible. The whole requirements for high risk is just technically not feasible. Like you need perfect data sets that are unbiased, that are complete, that are representative, and all of that just does not exist. We have to reduce biases, yes, but bias-free is an illusion. And in fact, there's not just the AI Act, there's the GDPR, And the AI Act and the GDPR are contradictory because the AI Act requires you to use complete data sets, while the GDPR just requires you to do the opposite. And the same with the Data Act and all these other new proposals, they all are just contradictory. And I think that's one big problem. And personally, I don't think there are a lot of new legal issues that arise through AI. I think most is regulated already. Also in the field around autonomous driving, I think almost everything is regulated already. There isn't that much of a need for AI-specific regulation. At least that's what I hear when I talk to lawyers. And yes, every member state tries to address this topic. So yeah, let's have 27 AI laws. Let's have competition, and we shouldn't just stifle innovation in the whole European Union. So I think if every member state wants to address AI, they shall do it, and we'll finally have competition. So that's my view on this. I wish I could stay longer, but what I will do is I will share my written evidence for you that I wrote last year for the German parliament when I was invited as an expert witness. And I just want to highlight, I'm not at all against regulation. I think regulation is important where there is a real threat to health and safety. And for AI, I don't see that much of a need for AI-specific regulation. Rather, we should regulate new use cases that no one could ever think about. There are obviously some legal issues also around liability, but I don't think we need AI-specific liability laws. Rather, let's rethink liability from scratch. Because most of the laws we have in Europe that are about product liability are from sometime in the 90s. Almost all digital products are not actually covered as a product by these laws. So maybe we should rethink product liability from scratch and actually expand it to digital products that do things. And then all the AI problems that may arise are covered automatically. And they will be covered also when there are new implementations that are not actually AI. So I'll share my written evidence for you. And yeah, I hope we can keep in touch, and I would be very happy to join one of the follow-ups. And forgive me that I won't be able to join because I have 50 students still waiting to be presenting their projects today.
Great. Patrick, this is awesome. Thank you. Regards to the students, and best of luck to those presentations. It was from my side, a very refreshing, let's say, counter view to what we heard before. I want to pass on very quickly because also Tuyu has a little bit more time. And I think Tuyu is the UK ambassador for Women in AI. She's a program manager for responsible AI, for the responsible AI program at Google. And arguably, some would say that the legislations we're seeing coming already enacted or written targets some of these hyperscalers, some of these big companies like Google, like Facebook, like Amazon, etc. The GDPR, the DSA, the DMA, now what has been just agreed on is the Data Governance Act, so that actually those large platforms are targeted. So from that side, it would be quite interesting to hear from you. And I hope, I don't know whether you covered my question now, but over to you, Tuyu.
Thank you. And I'll just give this caveat before I start that I'm talking from my own point of view. I'm not representing Google in this talk. In other words, if I was going to talk on behalf of Google, I need to involve a PR. So just take whatever I say as told you. Yes, I'm not going to say what Google does per se. If we want to have a conversation around Google's approach to responsible AI, we can have a separate conversation on that. I'm going to talk about responsible AI. It's something really close to my heart. I don't just do it as a job. It's something that I really believe is really important in making humanity work with technology. So I'll start off with giving a few stories that some of you may be familiar with, but let's just start from, go back to the basics, to the foundations of AI and how it impacts people and society. All the stories I'm going to give right now are real stories that have happened in recent years, within the last 1 to 2 years. One was a young man who is residing in the United States, got home from work one day, got arrested in front of his wife and 2 kids. And after 33 hours spent in prison, they found out, oops, we arrested the wrong man. And I think we all know what led to that. It was a facial recognition software that had gone wrong. But literally, we know that there's a big problem with facial recognition software. We know the problem with AI in general. One of the major problems with AI is the data sets and data set quality. But these are things that are affecting human lives. And as everyone was talking in the room, I was thinking about the organizations behind this software that causes these problems. And unfortunately, in this man's case, and his name is Williams, in his case, there was a government, right, criminal justice systems that deployed this technology that affected this man's life. And it's not just his life, right? You think about the kids who saw their dad arrested, think about his own criminal records. He's an innocent man who got arrested. And there are lots of stories like these, especially in the United States, but we still have a few surveillance issues over here in Europe. I'm going to say another story really closer to home. This had to do with a case called Siri in the Netherlands. It was a case that a human rights association won against the Dutch government last year. Some of you may be familiar with it, but the Dutch government decided to come up with a plan to detect welfare fraud. But unfortunately, it was targeting people from certain social economic backgrounds, from certain postcodes, and there was lots of surveillance on these people's car plate numbers and surveillance on them without their knowledge. And the human rights activists in the country got up and said, this is wrong. Why are you doing this without these people's knowledge? And can you give us some more information about this AI system that you're using? Well, we all know, hey, it's a black box. We cannot give information, but this is how we think it should work. I'm glad to say that the human rights activists won the case against the Dutch government. I'm a bit disappointed to hear that the Dutch government decided to do this against people who cannot defend themselves. If we did not have human rights activists stand up for these people's defense, they probably would never have even known what was going on. And they get fined for things that they're not even guilty of and they're not aware of. And the last example I'll give, very close to home for those from the UK, is quite recently the UK government decided, they came up to say that they're going to sell off all or give off all the NHS data to third-party agents. NHS is the healthcare system in the UK. And the moment I read that, all the hairs on my body stood up. Literally, I'm like, what is going on here? Is there no understanding of people's rights and data privacy? How do you sell people's data to third-party agents? Do we know what the use case is? What are they going to use my data for? And these are core questions. And again, thinking about the organizations behind this is all going back to the government. So I know we have legislations and we have the horizontal acts and all of that, but the question is, how is it going to be implemented? And I strongly believe, we have lots of work, nascent work on responsible AI, but there's lots of research already out there. We have frameworks, we have AI principles that organizations come up with to say, whatever AI systems that we develop today, they should not harm people, for instance, they should not propagate bias, they should not propagate discrimination, they should be fair to people. We're not going to use it for the use of weapon development, and so on and so forth. And once you have these foundations, it's also important to build out a framework and processes. And that's where I come in my role at Google. And, I talk about this all the time. We have different frameworks, and a lot of people have mentioned a lot of things around accountability and explainability, and it's all about just developing a framework, coming up with tools and processes for each of these frameworks, but educating organizations and people working in these areas and how to implement them. And I really feel that's important. And, I can start off with fairness. Fairness is looking at, the bias issues that we find in AI and ML systems. Like Patrick said, it's never going to go away, but we can reduce it. We know we're never going to have an AI system that's going to be 100% free of bias, but we can reduce it, right? And it's thinking about the impact of that ML system on different subgroups and underrepresented groups in society, and measuring the false positives and the false negatives, and measuring the results of these things, and just being user-minded. John started off with the lack of user trust and consumer trust in AI. That's great. I believe if we have these responsible AI frameworks in place, that will solve it, but that's not the main problem as well. The main problem we're thinking about is the effects that AI systems, negative effects AI systems can have on people, such as discrimination, injustice, bias, privacy, and safety. These are really important things. And for me, part of why it's so important to me as well is if we don't develop these frameworks now, and I wouldn't just say regulations, because people need to have a sense of responsibility towards this. If not, they can just try and cut and paste, do something, do it in a very roundabout way just to tick off that box on regulation. But the ethos of that organization and their products is still not addressing the right things. And it can go on from generation to generation. And that's my biggest fear. That's part of why I got into this area is what sort of world are we going to leave our kids to if technology can go wild scale? And there are lots of technology and data sets that have already gone wild scale in the world today that had so much issues. And they were recalled after like 8 years, 10 years, 16 years, after some research scientists does some investigations on it and finds out, oh, it's full of bias. Oh, it's going to harm people. So back to the frameworks, we have fairness, we have transparency, we have safety, we have privacy and security, we have robustness, and lots of talks around fairness trade-offs with privacy. There's lots of work that can be done in these areas. And these are the different frameworks that can be built around AI systems. So as we're helping organizations and saying, hey, we want to improve the economic turnover in Europe, we want to also educate them and give them tools and processes to say, this is how you can build an AI system in a responsible manner. So we're not just thinking about economy and thinking about profit making, but we're thinking about the impact of society that wouldn't just be existence in the 21st century, but we need to lay these frameworks and foundations for years to come. And just to end with this, putting my Women in AI UK ambassador hat on, we also need to think about building diverse and inclusive AI teams, because part of the problem with AI is not just the data sets and the data quality, but it's also the lack of diversity in these teams that are building these AI and ML systems. And there was an Alan Turing report that came out last year, and it showed that it's only 20% of women that are in the AI industry in the UK, and that number has been the same over so many years. And it's not just for women; it's like making sure we have fair representation of society within these teams. And these are the sort of problems we need to think about, because the more we think about these problems, we can think about solutions and hopefully come up with the right solutions to help everyone across Europe and the world. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Torju. I think it was a quite contrast. We heard from you addressing the real issues, mainly related to biases and face recognition, and what AI is doing in order to profile people, etc. And before we had the regulatory view, and with Hans we had a trend in the business and enterprise. So I think we're kind of seeing, it's not clear, right? When you hear one voice from an industry say, well, it's not that, not that problematic. The regulators would say, yeah, it is, because we have many laws. We want to harmonize that, will increase, make it better. And then we see it from the consumer side again, from the privacy side, and we see many problems, what you have highlighted. We have the discussion afterwards, but now we go back again to the industry side. And I think that will be probably different again when we have Roland talking now what Bosch is doing, which is not in the, let's say, social media, not in the consumer side, but in industrial goods. I think here the issues are again different, which basically ask for an assurance approach, which is very specific and addresses the very specific issues. This is what my feeling is already. So thank you again for your time, and I would pass on to Roland for your presentation. And do you want to do it?
Can you help me with the presentation? Or
yeah.
If it's too complicated, I could also try to do it verbally. I don't know if it's like comprehensive enough. But,
yeah. Just you start and I switch.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe I manage that.
Okay, I'm like addressing today 3 topics. So Torsten asked me to present what is our industry doing, what is relevant for Bosch, what are AI application cases. There I'm going to drop some information. Then I want to address the topic, what is actually different between AI validation or AI quality and classic software? Because from my perspective, there is some kind of difference, especially if we want to give evidence, not proof quality, but give some indication. Yeah. And lastly, I want to address some topic, give an example about the data standardization. So I think data can be standardized to some degree, but the effort is high, and I want to show some thoughts on this. Yeah. Okay, then maybe look at the first slide. So we are busy in many topics. So where's Bosch using AI? So we really have like a corporate research and addressing also like problems which are not product specific. So we're looking at new solutions, doing fundamental research to identify if there are innovations which could lead to a future product. So like not like doing extended workbench for business division. So that is one large core that we're addressing. Then Bosch is doing a lot about manufacturing. We have like a very large international manufacturing network, and I must say it's one of the core expertises of Bosch to produce like cheap, high quality products worldwide. So where are we using AI there? I would say for robotics, that is one part, and the other one is of course for process optimization. Then a third topic is engineering and tooling. So we're doing, for example, products and vehicles. So we're looking into like engine calibration. This would be like where we use AI as a tool, but also like smaller tools which like make the life easier and save a lot of, how to say, engineer time and enable us to get quicker to the market with our products. Then we are busy in the field of business operations. So we're using AI for financial topics, also a little bit HR. And what is, from my perspective, important is like knowledge management, yeah, especially like requirements engineering, which is a complex topic and also has like legal elements in it. Then we're looking at topics like product enabling. So we are trying to resolve specific topics. A good example would be autonomous driving. There we don't have like state-of-the-art solutions. We need to like develop something to enable the entire system or the product. That is a topic that we're doing. And then we're using it to scale, like use tools in the data loop and develop tools which we can like apply to different Bosch units. For example, what I'm doing with my team is like to develop tools for validation, yeah, for general purpose validation. Okay, then go to the next slide. So to show you like what we're doing, we see like AI as a core competence. So in the past, we did like a lot of intelligent products like with sensors. But now where's the intelligence coming from? We, of course, need to apply AI. Therefore, we founded something like a dedicated unit, the Bosch Center for Artificial Intelligence in 2017. So we did like several projects, like here almost 200 and might be more. So I can't tell you what is like the core of AI for Bosch. We have different fields. We have like almost 300 experts at 7 international locations and are busy in the field of patenting, but also publications, and we have several international collaborations. So why am I telling you this? I'm not trying to brag. I'm just telling you that like the industry is taking it seriously and we're putting emphasis on it. And almost 300 experts are like just the BCAIs or the corporate research, and we have additional experts in the business division who develop the concrete products. That's the perspective. So I promised you to give a short glimpse on what is the difference between classic software versus AI. I try to like pick up an easy example. So think of like a manufacturing line where you need quality monitoring. You have like products you develop and you want to see if they fulfill the specification, if they're okay or not okay. Yeah. Usually you measure, I don't know, some kind of length or electrical property. This would be something you do. That is easy, could be done with classic software. And specific about this is that you have a clear specification. You say, I can measure it. The engineer understands this is the size, this is the voltage that needs to be fulfilled. And also the test is interpretable by humans. So it's clear what needs to come out, and the test is clearly derived from the specification. So let's say I'm not telling you something new, but for AI it's different. Mm-hmm. And I try to find like a comparable example. And what we do at Bosch in many manufacturing units is called optical inspection. You might know this. And in the past, it has been a case that we had a lot of really blue-collar workers who looked at parts the entire day and checked if they're okay or not okay. And we try to replace this with a camera, so we train like in classifier and show them like good examples and bad examples and use this for an optical inspection. Yeah? And what is different about this, you don't like specify precisely what is a good part. You show like extracted examples. You say, do it like this. This is exemplary, and learn it somehow from the data. And that's the problem, because it's like usually high dimensional, so it's not clear what is a good part, yeah? And how can you demonstrate that your classifier, your AI classifier really works? Also, the output is usually like complex. You might look into networks, use, I don't know, heat map methods, something like this. But it's hard for human to really agree. If some people come up to us and they say, why can't an AI expert just look at the data and the network structure, and then he says, oh, okay, it's fine, it works in the reality. So this is not possible, it's too complex. Yeah, this is too much of a burden from an expert. Okay, and then let's look at the next slide. Leads down to what I would call the ML validation crux. So what is the problem when you're validating or measuring the quality of AI? So every AI system is of course data-based. You have discrete data points, and this is, if you boil it down, usually the only information you have, or the only information you process. Yeah. So you don't know what is happening between the data points. You only have the data points. And if somebody really wants to prove or give evidence for some quality property, you don't want the evidence for the data points. You already have them. You want like the entire story. You want to have like a guarantee or an assurance that between the data point, nothing weird is happening. And that is really the AI validation challenge. And how can you resolve this? You can only resolve this by some premises or assumptions or additional knowledge, where you say, okay, the data should be smooth, or this should be like a typical distribution, or let's assume that it's like flat, or that these are all classes. These are all assumptions you can't prove, but you can, like, afterwards, you can see if they have been correct, yeah, and see if it works. Yeah? So this is the problem. So if we look at the next slides, how are we then testing it? If you want to prove some kind of quality or set up some standard, one choice that is often discussed is like to have something like a golden test data set. This is closely related to like the scientific data sets, MNIST, Kitty, you all know these data sets. Yeah. What is the problem if you like use one golden data set for like industry, for example, for autonomous driving? Firstly, I think it's quite critical to find like an agreement within all the suppliers, automotive suppliers, yeah, to put them all on the table. Could be tedious, yeah. It's not saying that the people wouldn't contribute, they might have an interest, but it's difficult. Then secondly, usually the data formats are quite different. So if we, for example, want to have like a radar validation data set, which radar sensor are we using? The Bosch one or the competitor's one? So it's not that easy. Yeah. And then thirdly, maybe you can come up to an agreement, but the technology has changed. You have learned something. Yeah. You constantly need to adapt this data set. So for each, like, how do you say, validation purpose, you would need to have like a team which is constantly requalifying, renewing the test data set. And this is quite tedious. I'm skeptical that this would work. So if you're looking at alternatives, I would suggest there might be two levels to discuss. To be like not the industry guy who says, oh, don't overregulate us. I say what could be possible, but I say the effort might be quite high. Yeah? So one thing that could be standardized could be something which you call like data quality dimensions. I know this is not an aesthetic test data set. You have to specify contents or coverage of your space, so to make sure that you're not missing something. Second example would be you have to specify the distribution. Is it like related to real world distributions, or are you like cheating your metric that if you're only like including like the easy data points, which like give you the impression as if you're like quite positive or superior against your competitor. So these could be like dimensions to specify without even specifying like what the actual distribution is. So this level 1 could be something which might even work like cross-domain, yeah, like I don't know, industry, manufacturing, automotive, yeah, could be feasible or something similar to this, yeah. And then the second level could be something for, I would say, safety relevant or high risk applications. You could really then specify some premises which have been used for assurance. So if you're talking about context, you could really say, okay, for my optical inspection system, you need to include all lighting conditions, all temperatures in the test data set. Otherwise, it's not complete. Maybe not everybody wants to incorporate his corporate knowledge, but there might be especially safety critical contents where you say, okay, this needs to be shared industry-wide. This could be subject to some kind of standardization. And other example could be like the ideal distribution, that you say this is like for automotive, rural part, automotive, motorway part, city part, that you say this is like the standard we use for validation, to make it comparable. And if you are like validating in this way, you have the chance to update the requirements. You can, if you have new findings, if you identify, for example, new safety critical scenarios or situations or influences, you can say, okay, let's update it. The new data set need to fulfill more complex requirements. And secondly, if you working on this level, you are solving the problem that are attacked. It's transparent. A human can understand what lightning is, what an influence is. This is like a domain property. A human can interpret a distribution, or at least analyze it and understand to some degree what it means. He's not looking into some network structure and tries to find some kind of KPI or And therefore, these could both be possibilities. But if you're thinking about what would be required to really validate a complex safety critical system, this includes a lot of effort, a lot of engineering. We might not have all the information. So technically, I think it's feasible, but we must be careful which applications something like this could be used. Looking at the last slide, I'm just summarizing what I told you. So data standards help for major topics. They're especially high-risk applications, safety relevant applications, and they might also help for who said that value chain, to transfer data set. So you can agree upon specific quality standards and contents that you transfer between different partners. Possible standardization fields could be what I call data set quality dimensions, or these really defined assurance premises, which then contain real numbers and real contents. Okay, thank you.
So, thank you very much. Just turn the screen sharing on. Right. So, oops.
Just while you're doing that, may I ask a quick question? Are you aware of anyone doing any work in these areas of, for instance, assurance premises?
I'm not as broad in politics, and I must say, we of course work in this in my team, but for rather low complex problems. We would call it embedded AI. For autonomous driving, it's difficult. And I think it's going to develop in this direction. I think it could be helpful. I don't see a mainstream. We are especially busy in the automotive industry, autonomous driving, and this is not established there. And for manufacturing, I'm not sure if it really makes sense, because manufacturing in most cases is not safety critical. And as Patrick said, we have the safety relevant topics and manufacturing in the system. So there's not an AI specific thing to do. So maybe this only makes sense for safety topics.
I was really, my ears pricked up when you said about using AI for testing PCBs, because we have a student at Bath at the moment who is building a project to try and do that, and I'm not supervising them. I was initially incredibly skeptical about this because the dimensionality of the space is so high. I mean, I think you pointed that out, right? What is an error? What is a dry joint? What is and trying to get enough test data in seemed to me to be an impossible job. So it'd be very interesting to see what the student actually and the supervisors together actually come up with in September. But I'm happy to share that with you when you see it. It'd be really
the result could be that you don't have sufficient data.
I think almost certainly I feel that that's what the result will be, but it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Therefore, we are focusing like on embedded AI, where you usually have some kind of test bench, like an engine, and you can generate data.
And I think the other point you made, just to draw out, was that the distance between data points, even in a large data set, the distance between the data points when you're in a high dimensional space can be extremely large.
Yeah.
So, you know, can't think about a two-dimensional graph with this little space between the points. Think about that being in 30 dimensions. You think about the space between the points. So even though you have a manifold in multiple dimensions that's inside a high-dimensional space, but the space between the points inside that manifold can actually be very large. And so how do you fill in the gaps? You know, how do you
interpolate between a bicycle and a motorcycle?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the problem, why we are rather focusing on the embedded AI.
Yeah.
You have closed data points, and then you can, like, what I call these premises, then you can simplify to some degree.
Yeah.
I think it's thank you very much. I think it's a fascinating topic you address, and it also shows how technical it is and it can be. The question is, how can regulators actually comprehend that? So I think this is another challenge, and I think this maybe causes some of the issues that we have this ex-ante approach. I say, wait a minute, I think you're missing the point here, where we're doing other stuff what you want to regulate maybe. Actually, Rob, you were not supposed to do a little bit of synthesis, and I'm really happy I don't have to do it, because, but we also have to consider time. So I think I will still want to invite you, Rob, to have a brief synthesis of what has been said, then we should open up very quickly and to have a little bit of a debate. And I think there are some issues we can raise here and discuss.
Yeah. So I despite trying to manage things online with the Zoom and so on, the speakers and stuff, I have made some notes. So for each of the speakers, and I'll just try and tie those together in 2 minutes.
Just move the notes from above your face, and then people...
If I'm still invisible, then no matter what I do, I'm invisible. I turned on my camera actually, so that so that you can see the remote people at least can see my lovely face. So probably all turn it off now. So, John, what you said right at the beginning about not everyone is convinced that horizontal regulation of AI is necessary. We've seen some evidence for that today. But in a pre-meeting that the three of us had, Torsten and John and I, we were quite sort of fixed that we don't want this AI Assurance Club to be just an argument about whether regulation is a good idea or not. That is not very productive. It's not really getting us where we go. What Toju was saying was, and I think she spoke on her own behalf, but nevertheless, I think we all know that Google are pretty anti the idea of regulation, but she talked about a framework. And I think if we're serious about trying to improve the quality and reduce the risk of AI systems, then whether or not there is regulation now or in the future, we nevertheless still do need to build assurance processes and try and get those to comply with whatever rules. You know, it's a work in progress, isn't it, as the rules happen. But there are nevertheless ways in which we can apply assurance processes and develop those to try and, as software developers and users of systems and so on, to try and reduce and assure ourselves that we're producing high quality things. Paul said that this is not just about political positions, it's about finding a process to come up with solutions. I'm quite positive about that. An interesting counter argument is whether or not that is really what the EU is trying to do, or whether actually what they're trying to do is put up a bit of a trade barrier to maybe the US and China and so on, to try and make it more difficult for them to compete in the European marketplace. I'm sure that they would argue that's not the case, but that is clearly what other people are saying about this from wider afield, and we ought to think about that as well. It was interesting that Patrick, who didn't have too much time to speak, but pointed out that AI and GDPR the AI Act and GDPR are at the moment contradictory, because one says that you have to use the full data in your AI system to remove bias and all of these things, whereas GDPR says you really must use the minimum data that's necessary. So they, in essence, they are contradictory. And Patrick also thinks that we don't need specific regulation, but we should regulate the new use cases that are enabled by AI. And just getting away from, whether we should or we shouldn't think about regulation. It is absolutely true that there are many new use cases now that we have an AI system, like automated PCB inspection is just one that you mentioned. But there are many things that we would never have attempted to do before we had. Just think about machine vision, for example. So there are lots and lots of more use cases now, and trying to maybe enhance product regulation is a useful thing to do. To take into account that there are now products that are being developed that were never developed before, and current product regulation may not be adequate to cover those products. Again, maybe we should be sort of extending the best practice of people, scientists and engineers involved in building systems. I'm an engineer, really, who pretended to be a scientist for a while and now going back to being an engineer again. And so I think this is an engineering problem, and you need to increase the quality, and there are ways in which we can do this irrespective of regulation, really. And then, yeah, I think I've covered just about. Oh, Hans, yeah, it was really interesting what Hans said about Gartner. Gartner has sort of identified decision intelligence as a rising star, as one of the key things coming over the hill, and whether they can be automated by AI. And Hans made the very salient point that AI is always trained on historic data. Now, it seemed to me that this just begs me to make the point that that's not the way that the human brain works. So the human brain is always anticipating the future. The human brain puts all its effort into thinking about the future by using simulation. There's lots of psychology experiments to show that. And if you just think about how humans think, we think about the impact of things. And that's how your human chief executive of an organization can consider novel scenarios and have a bit of a go at working out what the best decision could be taken, where an AI system would have no chance because in the past. So AI technologies as they stand at the moment, certainly machine learning, learning from data, supervised learning, really doesn't even begin to address what's needed to think about novel scenarios and make good intelligent decisions in those scenarios in a high dimensional space, and where there is considerable uncertainty and lots of unknowns as well. Of course, you have to operate in a situation, if you're a CEO, where there's many unknowns. And to predict the future, when you don't predict the future, you make a best guess. So that kind of judgment is something that I think it's going to be a long way away technically before AI is able to produce those solutions. Because of the brain working on the future through simulation-based prediction, we don't see too much of that at the moment. So those were just some of the points that I sort of gleaned from the talks, and I thought they were all excellent talks. So thank you very much, everyone who presented this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. And yeah, I would just open for more discussion. But before, maybe we had two coming late. Maybe a brief introduction would be. Gerd, do you want to say a few words who you are, and then you as well?
When?
Yeah, I mean, whatever you want to say. So welcome.
I'm basically a pensioner as a former director and ambassador of the European Union in Asia and Europe. And I'm a good friend of Paul, of Macron. I'm not an expert in AI, but I'm an expert in communicative things.
Sorry, can you just repeat?
SABATH.
So there's a good course in how Brussels works, but of course with John, we have a lot of this expertise.
Hi, I'm Stefan. Sorry for being late. I come from BCW, which is a PR public affairs agency. Some of people in the room are also closely affiliated with the agency, and my background is really in policy and political science, but I focus on technology in my work, and some of my clients are also in this field.
Thank you. Well, I would invite some. Do you have some immediate reflections about what has been said?
I do.
You do? Okay.
Or sorry, you
Yeah.
were asking
No.
specifically?
Just open up now for some discussion. Yeah.
I don't know if was it Choju? No, sorry, Patrick, I think was referred to a specific part in the regulations, but in the AI Act, there is actually a paragraph that exempts you from the GDPR minimization principle if the data that's collected is for bias testing. So they do contradict, but I think that specific paragraph takes that into account. And in terms of what Paul said about AI and democracy, something to keep in mind is what is the overall goal of this group. I think it's more than trying to keep us competitive or profitable. I think it's about how our society will look like. Just in Myanmar, Facebook spread hate speech and fake news that led to the genocide of Muslims. So I think it's important to not take lightly on things that might seem low risk. And I'm wondering, how will this group ensure that the best knowledge and facts is surfaced to the decision makers? Because the basis of a good democracy is an well-informed voter base. And even in this room, there might be people who have certain agendas that might contradict that we want to keep society democratic and what that society should look like. So what we really need is a good way to govern information. How do we make sure that we know the right things so that we make the right decisions based on that, especially if this group is going to launch different solutions and initiatives? With a lot of new technology that has been implemented, for each new solution, we implement 5 new problems. So how do we ensure that whatever we come up with does not create additional problems?
Thank you. I found also quite interesting, and I wrote down the quote that AI is the most profound expression of democracy. Quite interesting. You said it's a tool, right? AI is a tool, it's a technology, and I don't know any other technology, maybe nuclear, which has been kind of this way politicized. I mean, even say it's democracy, but it's actually politicization of that. The only other one which had this kind of politicization was the internet itself, as at that time the fantasy that it would spread democracy because of this decentralized architecture, etc. And we know that it is not the case. So in a way, I just remember that the Data Management Act just coming out, and that the BDI, the German Industrial Association, the leading one, said, oh, you should separate the politics from that act from the technology. So I think, yes, I have a lot of sympathy for mine, and maybe as a moderator I should not have too much content now, but also it's quite staggering how the technology becomes politicized, and that I think needs to be addressed in a way. It hasn't been done before, like with any other technology. That's my view. Yeah.
So can I make an observation?
Yeah.
And comment and question. One of the things I find interesting from what Patrick mentioned, Patrick Dennis, about we should look out for these particular groups that are looking at this, and I think the challenge of this club is to find those groups. I found it refreshing in London 2 weeks ago when the Centre for Data Ethics and AI were saying, well, this is a very big challenge to look at how. It's a very broad area, it's a large scope, so where do you focus? And one of the things that they mentioned was to focus a bit on the procurement side. You mentioned, and a lot of this is embedded, so if you're going to be embedding AI into things, then procurement is sometimes part of that process. It's just very refreshing hearing the Bosch presentation today, because over the last 2 weeks, trying to look at getting people to come to the club, some of the people I would normally talk to might be the CEOs and even CTOs and strategy people in SMEs and stuff. They wouldn't necessarily be jumping up and down to say, I want to come to the club. because they're thinking about business, they're thinking about getting their business and getting the proper solutions out there. So I think there's something in procurement, there's something in engineering and quality, and the people who are in the universities who are trying to look at these challenges, who are focusing on the research of this, maybe there's a special group in the subset of this huge AI world that maybe we can get more connected with if we're going to get some tangible progress. Because it's a danger we become a talking shop, right? And nobody wants that. So we want to, I've been interested in your suggestions, friends of friends, and how to make those next steps, because it hasn't been easy, even just to get this thing started. And I'm interested to hear your perspective of kind of going to the next step of getting those people interested. Because not everybody wants to do this. I remember CEO of a robotics company said, Pat, you know, AI security isn't the first thing I want to talk about.
May I reply one sentence? That was exactly the warning at the end of my short statement. Because I know I can already guess, if you address now German companies, who will come and who will not come. And that's why I said we need the right mix of stakeholders. Because otherwise we preach to the choir, we get the same people who would come to all of these things, yeah? But then the whole thing will be without any use. Yeah? So we need to convince those people who would normally not come. Yeah? Otherwise, and give them some good arguments, yeah? Why for their business it's necessary, yeah? What they can benefit. Otherwise, the same people will come who already know what they benefit, and then we will have more duplication of the people who are already sitting there.
Yeah. I mean, you meant Leo, maybe first.
I had a couple of kind of comments on this AI Act and what it is actually are. The question is, people are very often saying that it is horizontal, and they're saying it's impossible to have regulation in a way. But if you look at the Act itself, it is defining risk according to certain kind of areas of domains, and it actually makes it even it has two parts. It has social risk that are defined in Annex 3, and it has safety risks that are defined by whether it has CA marking or not. Both of those ideas are vertical. So the social risks are coming from education, for example, and it is not by measuring the risk, that is by defining it politically. It is about hiring people, it is not measuring the risk, it is defining that it is risky. Whatever you do at the domain is risky according to regulation. And the requirement in the way is that then if it's risky in that defined way, you have to do a risk management system that figures out what is the real risk. We can do the latter one, so it's easy technically. You can figure out whether an Excel sheet is risky when you do education for it. So this is what it is. But now we have to make it simple. The idea is that you make the application of the system in so that the risk management system becomes beautiful. It is something that can be safe and can be made fast in a way, an efficient way, so that everybody is not spending hours of figuring out whether my answer is okay. So that is the time. Or when there is a real risk, you actually have a good risk management system that works. So it is a fully vertical regulation. Let's not talk about this kind of horizontal aspect of it. That's ordinary on top. It does not contain what it actually is really about. It has societal risks, vertical it is addressing, it has safety risks, vertical it is addressing. And it is very often, even in societal risk, if you look at the risk vectors are different. So you cannot say that horizontally they would be the same. Looking at, let's say, surveillance has different risk matters than education, for example. You cannot have same analysis of risk between those things. They are not horizontal kind of qualities. If you think about self-driving car, if you think about, let's say, a medical area, they have again different types of risk paths that are again vertical and put it on that. So we can do that in a way. So there is another small comment about which people were saying that you had a very good comment about there is an extra statement that bio kind of, let's say, signals are not in are excluded in the act. Actually, one doesn't need that statement, because if you say data minimization is used, as GDPR is saying, and if your system needs all the data, then data minimization is all the data. If you You just look at the system. It is not so that you think about, previously we were doing something else, we were not using AI for it, then a small amount of data is enough. So that's a minimization, minimal data for that. For this case now, in order to do it properly, we need all the data. Then we can gather all the data. So it is not such a bad population, if you say. It doesn't have this, if you look at really what the text is in a way, it doesn't have these contradictions in that way. It is well written. So in very often in the cases, but you have to understand what it means.
Thank you. We have one from the Zoom, Krishna.
Thank you for this very wonderful talks and discussions. I think the topic that is discussed in this round is very important. At Kansai, we are creating AI for the construction sector. And for this sector, it is particularly important. There's thousands of construction companies, small, medium-scale companies spread across Germany, Europe, and so on. And it is really important to have given AI that can understand the construction, understand what's happening, and also something that's easily usable, which is more democratic. So I think it's really relevant about how to engage small, medium-sized companies which are doing manufacturing, construction, and so on. I would just like to bring attention to one particular topic which I think often gets neglected. And this is about philosophical and organizational problem. I call this a neurosymbolic divide in the AI community. I'd like to take just half a minute to just explain what I mean in very simple words. Just my 2-year-old daughter likes to understand when she learns something. The second generation neural AI doesn't understand when it learns. For example, when it just learns to recognize a face, but doesn't understand what a face is about and what a face is for, right? What the purpose of the face is and so on. That's a problem. And for the 2-year-old, we can explain to her and train her to be accountable, hopefully. And but the second generation AI is not accountable. I think that's why we're having this meeting. The interesting part is that her brain is completely composed of neurons. Yeah, that's what is interesting. It's as we inside our brains. But the interesting part is also that she has crossed, as a human, she has crossed the neurosymbolic divide, unlike some of the animal species. That's interesting as well. So I believe that the AI has, the problem I think is that the AI has made a sharp transition from symbolic AI to the so-called second generation neural AI. It's a very sharp transition between the two generations of AI. And I really think that if we want to make AI accountable, we need to move to the third generation of neurosymbolic AI that understands when it learns. So when it's learning something, it also understands what it's learning about. And hopefully that kind of AI is something that we can make it accountable. We're trying to do this with third generation explainable AI at Kansai Technologies. But I would really like to see a larger community pursuing the third generation of AI. I believe that as long as we are caught in the second generation of AI, we would only, a black box AI, we would only be talking about how to make this AI explainable, how to make it accountable. But we need to bring this accountability within the AI itself, and that I think we can do only when we move beyond the second generation into the third generation of explainable AI. That's the point that I wanted to bring forth to this community here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Krishna. Greetings to Munich, where you are located, I guess, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I would like to add another view to this entire discussion and story, and it's maybe an AI positive view or AI supporting view. We talked a lot about safety and security and in this direction of assurance, but what's about assurance for the European industry, for our small and medium-sized companies and our enterprises? Yeah, I've been reminded by a slide of you where you mentioned 200 patents somehow related to AI. How can we patent it? How can we protect ideas which are generated in the European Union and the companies of the European Union? How can we protect it against other people going to patent it outside in the US and coming back with license requests to us? We are currently seeing a huge war going on, and you classify it from the telecommunication companies like Huawei or like ZF or like Nokia and whatever, getting license agreements pushed into the automotive manufacturing industry. So that's fair, it's okay, but these kind of industrial imperialism, what's called, I would like to call it, from US companies and from China, Asian companies, that is something where protection for the European industry needs to be watched as well. From the view of when AI enters some products and comes to some special feature or some special competitive advantage, how can we protect this? How can we protect our industry? Or how can we make sure that we can use it and know somebody else is protecting our ideas in another country and coming then back and saying, hey, you owe me a license. I had a meeting with the head of IP of Volkswagen, Wiesner, recently, a couple of months ago, and he said, we are somehow positive to go standardization groups and discuss and try to force in ideas from the automotive industry into standards. But at the same time, we are deeply, deeply afraid that companies are taking the ideas, building a chip from it, and coming back with a license request, shipped to us 2 years later. And this kind of strategic protection of industry around AI is something which needs to be someday falls on the table.
That is a very good point if you look at AI and its transparency requirements.
Yep.
So if you're looking at essentially, I think that the gist of the transparency requirement is that in order to be transparent enough for the AI, you have to be able to that will be viable in terms of code. So then they will be happy if you. But that also creates a system that you have to publish the ideas that you have by default in order to get the product to the market. And that means that you don't have the same protection that patent is giving. With patents, you have a deal with the society. You tell your idea, but I actually get rights to the idea, and I'm the only one who can run it.
You can protect your code.
Yeah, you need no protection. Now the protection is gone. In AI systems, what you have, you bring it in the market. You require basic transparency. Everybody wants to know the explanation, how it works in the system, and then suddenly you give them out, and there's no return for the investment.
Yeah.
So this is what you mean, and this is
on the edge between open source software, AI, open source. I give it to someone and it bubbles, and then it develops and it gets its own life. But on the other hand, I don't want to send somebody to take things out, get a patent and put in the US for it.
Well, China works so that you get a good idea, you give it out, and then somebody is attacking you.
Yeah.
But of course, then there should be this kind of patent deal that saying that it is already existing idea.
But I think it's a very good topic. It's a focus point that the club could look at. Maybe put a bit of research into to look at that particular challenge. I think that might be something that the CEOs of those companies that I was trying to get interested might be saying, okay, well, I want to protect my product. Maybe I'll come and listen to this. It's a good idea.
Can I just say something about transparency, because I was on the working group that just produced the IEEE 7001 standard for transparency of robots and autonomous systems. And there we identified different user groups that would need different levels of transparency. So it's not necessarily appropriate or helpful or doesn't facilitate an better understanding if you make some systems completely transparent to end users, right? Because you can overload them with information. At the same time, different user groups, such as accident investigators, would need to be able to see a much, down to much more detail. However, those people, when they do their work, could be bound by confidentiality agreements. If you think about what happens with assessment of software systems at the moment, and assurance of software, which is very widespread, ISO 9001, for example, then someone can come in and assure your processes. That doesn't mean that they have to then make everything transparent to the public. they can still be bound by some confidentiality, but you've got a third-party person coming in and saying that they've met a certain set of requirements, you've applied certain tests, and these processes are rigorous and so on. So I don't see that necessarily the problem of making AI systems transparent means that there'll be a loss of IP. I think there are ways around that.
Thank you.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
So there's several things, but with the open source movement with software, I mean, a lot of companies have open source things without losing any business, and that has only led to more business because more people are developing on top of those open source libraries. And also, when something is open source, you become more competitive because other customers will choose you because you are open source, because then they're not locked to you as a vendor. And also, sometimes the things that are open source is not necessarily what you make money off. Sometimes it's the application layer at the very top in terms of how does it feel like using it, what is the user experience, and not the function itself. People don't buy Apple products because it's a better product, it's because it feels better to use it. So I think it's important to sort of not to be too scared or to have to actually look at it realistically from the past. Like, software has been open sourced. What has that done to software? It has only blossomed. And same with data sets. Because we have open sourced data sets, more AI products are coming. And one organization that is working on this is here in Berlin called Hippo AI. It's a nonprofit. And what it does is that when you donate your health data to that organization, it creates a license for the algorithms that are trained on that health data, so that those algorithms must be open source. And that's something to consider. If American companies are creating algorithms based on European data, what if we had an open source license, so that if they do steal our ideas and train algorithms on top of European data, then they have to open source parts of it, or open source it after a certain amount of years, like we do with medication. You're allowed to make profit of it for an X amount of years, and after that, that's everybody's value, because public health data is now public domain. But if all the algorithms are locked up into companies, into IP, then all of that public value is then transferred out to private companies instead. And I think it's also important to remember that bad ethics is bad business. When Amazon created an AI to sort resumes, it sorted out all the women, and it started recommending unqualified candidates. So it's not just unethical, it's a bad algorithm. You don't want unethical algorithms because it means there's something wrong with it. It has noise, so it's suggesting bad things. So it's actually better for business if you have good ethics. And I think this is something that we can learn from cybersecurity. In the beginning, nobody wanted to implement cybersecurity. It's resource intensive, but now we see how important it is. We have to have good cybersecurity, and we shouldn't allow companies that don't have the resources to have good cybersecurity to deal with our most critical infrastructure. We don't want that. We shouldn't have that. And there's a lot to learn in terms of how they manage the risks. They have the same issues, that there's always new risks in cybersecurity. How do they manage that? How do they react so quickly? And I think I don't think we have to have everyone at the table right now. I think what we need is just enough resources so that we can start developing something and implementing something and show the benefit of change. A lot of legacy companies are still haven't implemented technology, but they know that if they don't, they're gonna die. And I think it will be the same thing for this and for agile methods. And cybersecurity also has standardization, so we can look at how do they standardize things. And we also, do you think that cybersecurity has hampered innovation? Because I don't think so. I think it has protected us from a lot of external attacks from other political countries, actors.
And I think it's important to consider what is the alternative if we don't implement enough safety procedures. You see in the US, because of the increased polarization and the lack of information to the public, their political progress is reversing. They just removed abortion rights for women. And that's a big, big impact on society. And we need safety precautions here if we don't want to reverse the political progress we have here in Europe.
Very short comment, not to the last topic, so that is a very good comment for you. It is about Amazon and the thing. So when they train a system from their data, and they find out that women are discriminated, so the AI that is bad, the AI solution is excellent because it proves the point. So now it comes to what Hans was saying, that it's all about use cases. If you use it to figure out, okay, to check whether I have discrimination or not, it is a wonderful tool for it. Yeah. It's exactly what one has to do. If you start using it for hiring, you have a bad thing coming. It's the position, it's not the, and they still kicked out all the engineers that were proving that they have a problem. But I haven't heard that Amazon has actually made anything to actually change the problem they really had, which they have now proved that they have. Yeah.
They claim that they didn't use it. They claim that they never actually used it.
Yes, yeah, kind of. But then when they were heroes, they were actually saying that, okay, that we seem to have a problem. Next story, that would be nice. But this is also, and this comes from the fact that we're talking about transparency as well, in a way, because sometimes in figuring out, for example, whether there is discrimination in some systems, they actually would require transparency, which is beyond the benefit of the company to disclose. So if you work at the government, you go to the Dutch case that was talking around here, so what was the kind of problem around there? You actually require quite a lot of data in order to prove that something bad is happening. And now the question is that whether there could be capability for giving for access for NGOs or some of these kind of civil organizations that should have an access, perhaps restricted, so because you have privacy data on it, in a way that they could go and use AI to check this. So AI is a mirror. It's a mirror of us. We use the data. So that is a good comment. I have heard some. So in a way, and that is a very good thing that sometimes look at the mirror and then do actions on that. So we can, and then it's not needed in a way. I didn't mean that the transparency should be gone because it is contradictory to a certain extent. I meant that actually there's a good way of looking how the transparency is made and actually then finally standardized in our systems and how we actually expect it to use it. And this is exactly what we could talk about here as well. Yeah. So we are talking about the implementations of this system in a way, how practical implementation on the standard level would actually go and how the exchange of these capabilities would go through the supply chain.
So let me make just a very quick point about IP. It will be very quick. I can understand your concerns about IP because very large organizations who own customers, own installations, have large contracts and relationships and so on, are often not particularly interested in protecting their software. It's not their core business, it's not what's interesting to them. So companies that operate at scale often are not concerned at all about their software being open source or becoming, available. However, small companies, having been one, smaller SME type companies who make their money from writing software really are much more concerned about the intellectual value that's in that software and trying to protect that. That's all they have to sell at that point. They don't have lots of customers, they don't have lots of hosting facilities, they don't have lots of boxes that they want to ship, right? They don't have any of that. What they want to do is to sell their smart software at this point in time. And so for them, protecting the IP, it certainly is an issue, I think. So I have sympathy kind of with both camps here.
I mean, this openness is not an altruism, right? There is a business purpose. There is a profit-seeking element in that. Otherwise, I would not open up. And I think what is very important is that the fundamental ethic is still the profit ideal. So we see a strong concentration in the market, in the digital market, and these are the hyperscalers. These are the platforms. Which own the e-commerce, which own basically the social, which even own the public opinion. And I think this is also what probably has created that desire to regulate AI, which which has all these these dystopian views where we are not yet there what we believe what AI could do in the future. And I think so I think it's not sound almost like to romanticize this openness. So we work with a company, they do an analysis of the sewage canal. Germany has like hundreds of kilometers of sewage, and they drive with a small car through the sewage canal, and it's filmed looking for maintenance issues. And then usually there was a poor guy looking at the video, like hours of video, finding maintenance problems. But of course, you can train an algorithm, and then you send the data to an engineering company, and then they say, okay, we need to fix it. And I think what you said, Rob, this kind of trained algorithm you will not make open. Right? So because you trained that algorithm, and this is now your IP, and you want to protect it and you want to secure it because you want to sell this service to other companies. So I think there's rather a risk that we see a concentration of human talents that they go to the the Googles, etc. We see and I think Hans, you have mentioned it, the initiative from the EU to build large algorithm data sets or to train those. And I think there is certainly a concentration on those large, highly trained data sets, which will be not open source. I think this is where Europe has to step up to be competitive. Right? Maybe it would be good to know. I missed the word of this initiative where you are part of. Right?
LIM.
Yeah, the LIM.
Large European
AI
models.
Yeah.
Large European AI models. Yeah.
Just to pick up what Enrico Panay is saying here on the chat, because you can see it up on the screen here. He just said, just for the sake of clarity, transparency is a meta-ethical principle. It's not ethics per se, to support Rob's suggestion. So,
yeah.
Can I also just make a suggestion? So I think I just want to think what this club gonna be interesting project to do. Right? I think. So from what I say, I think we have the EU Act proposal. But I think what the industry need is how to operationalize that and how to have an example. We're not trying to criticize, but trying to support. So how to show example? I think like from my discussion, I think I heard Hans, you mentioned there are two types of AI application. One is embedded, one is probably a standalone, right, in cloud, right? It'll be interesting from my company perspective, how to take what exactly the UX as it is. Let's find an example. What again? One embedding like example, maybe autonomous driving or medical device or the watch, colleague mentioned, or another example which is on cloud, and how we apply the first of all how we apply this risk-based approach. How to assess this particular use case? Is it high risk or not? That is the first step. In industry, we want to know is how you the German I think German also data ethic the organization German data ethic commission actually have 7 levels of risks. How are we going to use that? How we come to so let's use a use case to say which level this is. And the second is that, okay, then if this risk is identified, if it's safety risk or if the risk is bias, then how we meet it, how we apply the EU Act, how we do that, we analyze this application or this what are the supply chain components, where's data from, where's algorithm from, and how to mitigate it. If safety probably is, it's more I don't know, robotic. Let's see, if the bias for data, and let's just do a case study, and maybe it's but maybe for cloud we can say maybe a high HR application or fault detection for being applying whatever. It's just cloud based, and also we apply the same. Then I think that would be very helpful as a business. Okay, now I know what is the best practice. How to use that. Even this law or regulation may change, but I think this will give the company this like benefit, also the kind of confidence that okay, this is roughly how this can be done. I think it would be very interesting to see how we can this cloud can do something, can complement the regulation. What I can think is you start with use cases and to really to.
Yeah, just to add to that, I completely agree. And somebody mentioned that we don't know what people are doing out there. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm joining a research project at Charité that's actually going to look at all the frameworks that exist out there and try to validate what is going to work and actually look at how do we go from vague principles to practical procedures, particularly for medicine. And I think if we want a better overview of what people are doing out there, it's easy to create a database of that. I think if you really want something to happen, I think there are a lot of people who want to do things, but they don't have the resources. If you really mean that you want something to happen, then you have to put in the resources. And if we do develop best practices, like you say, then this can affect the regulations rather than the other way around. And just a comment for what you said earlier that AI is politicized, that is because AI is politics. When you look at an AI algorithm and decide whether it's fair or not, is it fair that it's hiring or shortlisting 50-50 men and women, or is it more fair that it's shortlisting 70% women, because right now 80% of the employees at Amazon are men. So it is definitely politics, and I don't think we should try to separate the politics from the AI, because it's a human sorting machine. And in terms of transparency, I think, and I've talked to a lot of AI researchers and practitioners about this, what is missing is a clear definition of all these vague high-level principles. What is actually transparency? We cannot discuss transparency on one end thinking that everything's going to be open source, and that on the other end it actually just means you're giving access to auditors. You give access to auditors to accounting, and that's fine. So we just have to clearly define what transparency is, or else these discussions will not go anywhere, because we're not talking about the same things. And in terms of open sourcing algorithms, I completely understand that a lot of people or a lot of companies are depending on their IP to make money. At the same time, what we see in real the market is that companies, health AI companies, want to use Hippo AI's license because they have created the algorithm now, but now they don't have additional data to update the algorithm. So the algorithm will deteriorate unless they get more data. So they'd rather open source the algorithm than not have access to more data, because either way they will not make money. Thank you.
So that was a good comment. Commenting also on the use cases, I think autonomous cars would be a very nice use case to figure out. So it is high risk by default, because it is one of the ones that requires CE marking when you take it to the market. Then it means that in order to be harmonized with the AI Act, it has also to be checked with all the criteria that you have in this societal risk side. In a way, for example, against discrimination. So whether the driving habits of the car would be such a way that it would actually discriminate. So that would be, so this is the type of, and that is a level of question that it has to handle, because it.
But there are some use cases of driving, like detecting when driving you're tired, or whether you are drunk. I don't know whether this should be high risk, because but these are not all autonomous driving applications.
So this is a good example.
High risk. Object detection, yes, definitely that is high risk.
Yes.
But to test whether you are suitable for control, how tired you are, I don't know. I'm not sure, but maybe that's something worth to study.
Yeah, we have a strange dilemma here. What will happen clearly is that autonomous driving will get safer and safer, and in the average, the autonomously driving system will create much fewer damage and cause much less death. What's the difference? The difference is if the human, by human error, creates an accident or causes an accident, then you may check, was the driver in good health, or drunk or not, or under influence of other intoxicating substances. But that's it. If it's not one of these cases, it's simply a liability thing, it's human error. So, yeah, so whereas maybe a system that makes only 1/10 of the errors, so in general, it's behaving much better. If that thing does a mistake, people want to say, because of our today's notion of liability, we want to know exactly why it happens, yeah? Which for a human being, we cannot, we don't know. Maybe the person was tired or absent-minded or baffled by something, and we will never try to look into this brain, yeah? But in an artificial system, people will not rest and they will say, no, we want to know exactly, yeah? So you're supposed to, even in the system, and there we have to make sure, we have to think about, in the end, yeah, whether in the very end, if we get real tiny residual error sources, yeah, whether we shouldn't move to a kind of insurance-based damage treatment and saying, okay, in the end, yeah, this poor guy who was absent-minded for a while, he doesn't have to pay 2 million because he caused lots of damage. The insurance will do it. Yeah. So whether we shouldn't at this point come and say no, at a certain point, the looking for causes, yeah, like with airplane accidents, there's some cause you can do, and then there are some things where you will never find out. Yeah, and so this is one thing. And if I may say one more thing. In a way, I admire the attempts of the people who drafted this AI Act to get closer to the substance, not to the nature of AI, but it's already outdated in a way. Yeah? So because a certain new development, I think, is not in there. The big AI models that we see right now, they are built on transfer learning. Yeah? So that means you pre-train the systems with some knowledge, and then later you do it's called, harmlessly called fine-tuning. Actually, what's fine-tuning is the normal training, the training that we did so far. Yeah? So it's pre-trained on something, and then we train it for a certain application with labeled data like normal. But now there are some people, like especially in the ethics area, there's the PROMS project, for instance, by OpenAI, very interesting system that says, oh, we cannot go back and change all the data in order to make it more ethical. We take the educational approach. We do, between pre-training and the actual training, the fine-tuning, we do another level of training. Yeah, we train it to make sure that certain biases disappear. Highly interesting way. The way from machine learning to machine teaching. Yeah? So we teach the machine. So by transfer learning, we use certain things and the machine. So, but the difference between teaching and product so far is, if I take, if I buy a certain aggregate, a machine, and it doesn't work very well, who's at fault? The producer. Yeah? If I hire a person, and maybe I don't put him to the right task and don't check whether the person is qualified, then it's my fault because I'm the employer. Yeah, I took this person and thought, oh, he's a mining engineer, but he came from a school where they did only coal mining and not metal ore mining. Yeah, it was my mistake that I didn't test this person right, and he made a wrong decision. Yeah, so in the end, we will come with AI. I'm pretty sure. We will come to a point where some of the burden, because the use cases, the producer, the person who put together the data and did the training, can never foresee all the use cases. Yeah? We will come to a shared responsibility of the producer and the people who put it to task, yeah? who then have to make sure that they define the right tests, yeah, the right testing procedures, yeah, together maybe with third-party people, and make sure that the systems are tested right. And this is all not even, this will be the big new challenge, the big new wave, yeah, and it's not seen yet, yeah, that things are trained in stages, yeah, there's not one producer, it's different producers, maybe 3 different groups also trained the system at different stages.
At least one provider. Yeah. Always AI says is guilty. Now, what we can do is...
There's one what do you mean?
There's one
guy who sold it, the poor salesman.
Exactly, the person who is selling by market, it becomes a problem. It's always given.
Okay.
But now the question is that whether there is an industry agreement of actually sharing the responsibility and somehow the assurance system that we are figuring out here could be used for that purpose.
Yeah.
So EU wants to have legal certainty. So it thinks about they always have a person
to blame.
And that is the provider. And that's the reason why there is only one guilty person in there. But they don't prevent industry and different stakeholders to actually make an agreement who is liable.
But
the
thing is, I mean, we are right. But should legislation encourage the uptake and the use of new technologies, or should it discourage? Discouraging means if you blame one single person, but if you take care of the complexity of the whole thing, and say,
but we could even make a voluntary insurance policy. That is actually what you say. It doesn't have to be ruled by the government. We can actually make an insurance.
I see.
An insurance for AI damages.
Yes.
So I think
I think if the insurance company, I mean, there's only one sector which is not insured, it's the nuclear, right? So there's no insurance company which insures nuclear.
And the government says there's a gap in there.
Yes. So I think insurance, they will insure AI application or cybersecurity issues, so it's insurable. So
I think most lethal weapons don't have insurance for because they are used.
Because we have the from Krishna, and I don't know whether he's still there, because he's
just had to leave a moment ago.
Because he's in the built environment, and there's one apropos liability. There's one issue. The built environment is the least digitalized one, and they have also problems to use AI because they don't have the data, etc. But so when now data or algorithms are kind of shared or data are aggregated, why is it not working easily in the built environment? Because when you have the construction firm and then they get the data from someone else, then the house they built collapses. So who's actually liable? The data used from the third party, and because this is not sorted out. So there is a little bit of a demand for certainty, for legal certainty, and this has not been sorted out. And I think for those algorithms, when I use them from somewhere and I cannot be certain that the liability issue is kind of sorted out, I think we have. Then we have also what prohibits the uptake of this technology. So, and with this, I would agree to Paul that actually regulation can build markets, right? So, and I think the Act, and maybe here's one: how can it build markets in a positive sense? How can assurance, maybe not the Act, how can assurance build markets, basically? Right? That's maybe a question we can also.
I don't know. One short question about that. Construction, if I understand, is not in part of this Annex 3 cases. How you build your house is not safety critical defined by EU. There is infrastructure. There is a critical infrastructure, but it's not contained housing. It's just electricity, it's plumbing, it's and it has these three topics that are water, plumbing, and then electricity producing, and there is perhaps food line preservers. And then it means that there is no restriction from AI. To whatever you do in construction, you have to figure out liability according to the construction law.
No, there's no restriction, but there are blind spots. I want to.
There may be blind spots. Now the question is that to what level we actually want to have actions that we think that if we're a company, we figure something that make it right anyway, even if it's not kind of been built by the AI. Because I would expect that any proper company wants to have, for example, let's say cybersecurity correct in the AI is saying anything about kind of cybersecurity if you are working in low-risk areas. So not in these mentioned areas that I'm saying. You can do whatever, you can make it so bad as you like. Computer games is one of those. If you don't consider them as toys. But if they will be so that adults use them, perhaps then it's a toy, then you can do whatever. They can be they can break cybersecurity, all the laws. They can be kind of stealing your data somewhere. There have to be other laws to consider that. But it is not considered here in AI.
Torsten, I'm just thinking about the time, and I was going to say we've already lost a couple of people.
I know.
Good if John could sum up.
Yeah, shall we? I think in the interest of time.
Sure. Unless there was quick point, Nicholas, because I know you're waiting.
If you don't mind, just like 2 quick points. Like one regarding the liability issue. I think that's not a new question. This question of liability affects all kinds of product regulation, and usually it's solved in the way that, like as you said, the last person in the supply chain is liable, and then of course this company can recur on other manufacturers before. But I think that might be an interesting question, but not a question for our group, because it's a general question of liability for product. The other point I wanted to make, and I wanted to add or comment on Hans, like the first point you made, the dilemma you pointed out, that cars, autonomous cars, might become or might already be safer, and that we might be harsher on those systems than we are with human fault. I think you can generalize that problem, and that's actually bigger than just thinking of autonomous cars. That's a question that affects all the whole area of using AI as a safety component, because I think most discussions, when people are discussing the AI Act and so on, we are discussing certain AI systems and their safety. But a very interesting discussion is, can we not use, or shouldn't we use AI to improve the safety of existing products and use AI as a safety component? And even if those AI systems might have their faults, might not the overall safety be higher than not using those AI components?
Can you rephrase that in a question that is simple?
Let me give you an example. You can have
I have an example. If you are right, then you say, okay, the example is that if the self-driving car is producing less accidents than humans would do, whether putting those self-driving cars in the market would cause actually more accidents for humans to do. Whether the accident rate for humans would be higher if they are self-driving cars.
For what? For
if you have self-driving cars in the traffic, perhaps whether it actually causes that human drivers in that kind of way do more accidents than they would do. So now how you, this is exactly your second question on that with this statement.
I think Google did see that, didn't they? Because cars are able to react much quicker, and so they stop at late lights when they change late. And one of the big problems with Google cars is everyone else slams in the back.
They slams in the back. And so the question essentially is that how you be predictable for the human drivers as well in the system.
Yeah.
So these kind of effects can start to actually resonate in a way that in the this argument.
I think it's a nice addition to what I was trying to say. What I was trying to say is, if you talk to safety engineers, they're usually very critical about using AI in safety components. From their view, it costs less. AI can imagine improving the safety of a product by using AI components. So what I think is necessary, and probably is a necessary perspective to discuss, is that perspective of safety engineering, of classical safety engineering, because I think we need to rethink classical safety engineering, or it is crucial to have a mind change in safety engineering in order to be able to use AI to increase the overall safety of our products. Does this make sense?
Yeah, I think it's also worth saying, if you look at the psychology literature, the HRI, human-robot interaction literature, there's a number of experiments which show that humans are much less tolerant of machines making mistakes when they make decisions than they are of humans. There's this idea of a reasonable human is better to make a mistake. That we don't apply that logic, right, when we assess AI-based systems. So therefore we lift them to a higher standard and therefore always consider them to be failing.
In those words, there's a very important what you said on the things that is required. There's a two compromise that you do is about stability and about efficiency. If you want to have an efficient system, you have to go to systems that are very, very sensitive, that are very actually hard to control. So it is a fighter jet that you actually, no pilot can drive. It has to have an AI that is driving. And it is very efficient, it actually reacts to it. It is a very good controlling system. And that is how it is created, because the AI is so good at it. But then if you are aiming for stability, as you were saying on that, then everything becomes slow and you don't get the benefits of AI. Making efficient control means less power use, it means greener products, it means kind of the kind of capability of the system is much better. But it comes at the cost of being on the verge of being critical. And now the question is whether you trust AI to do that. And now you have the other part of the system that say, I want to have my aeroplane that is always stable. So these are the kind of, they always kind of like to have, let's say, where is your design point where you want to go? So that was a very good point that you talked about, that it's not so easy to solve that you always go for stability on the system. Because then you lose quite
All right. Wait, so we've lost 2 more people online. So let's have the final word to John. I mean, that's
very quickly. I know Stephanie wants to make a comment, but you will be here at dinner. I hope you're with us. We in the room have the pleasure of carrying on over dinner, so but we will close the formal meeting now. Just with a few observations from me. So these are the takeaways that were in a sense either surprises or I just want to clarify. So first of all, a little clarification. A provider is not just someone who puts a product on the market, but who brings it into operation. So we'll catch a lot of companies who are, rail operating companies who bring it into operation. So it's not just suppliers, it's people bringing it into operation. A couple of points that Paul made, that one I'd sort of forgotten, but he immediately reminded me of it, because this was I heard this so many times in the time I was working with the European Commission. Many of the things that the European Commission does are to maintain the integrity of the internal market, because if they didn't do them, Germany would do its thing, France would do its thing, well, Britain will do its thing anyway, but everyone else. So you'd have 27 AI acts, whether you like it or not. So a lot of what the EU tries to do is to try and maintain the integrity of the market, and that is worth our while remembering. The other important thing I thought, and it would be interesting, we can perhaps talk about this over dinner to see whether you agree with this. But he made a statement that he said there are no new substantive obligations in the EU AI. All this is doing is making sure that people are in a position to be able to show that they comply with underlying other regulations. Now, whether that's true, I'd be interested to get your opinion later. And the final thing I thought was important, well, the 2 things that were important to us, I thought, were he was very encouraging about being, and he could say operationalised better than I could.
No, you can say it and you practice.
He encourages us to operationalise and think about that, and he said it's good to be anticipatory, and I think that's he articulated what we have been thinking. And he also pointed out, and I actually think this is right, that the process that now the Parliament and the Council are going through, particularly Parliament right now, is an opportunity for getting to the truth, as it were. And I think that encourages to engage with us. I mean, we had our foundation forum in Brussels in December last year, was it? And we had Brando Beniki and a couple of other MEP. Brando is particularly influential in the Parliament's work. And I think it would be good if he continues to engage with it. And indeed, Axel Voss has been very open about engaging with us as well. Thank you very much. So I think engaging in the process and having, to Shin's point, a use case based information to bring to that process would be a very powerful way of engaging. So there's some things for us to think about. And the final thought, by the way, is when I was in Zurich a couple of years ago, somebody suggested that a way to, the AI itself, AI in political, its uses could be seen as societal choices. They said, but we had to think about this with legislation about animals. Because if your donkey kicks someone, whose fault is it? It's not the donkey's fault. You know, so you know, there's something about maybe we can look to the past and so Torsten, there's some takeaways. Great discussion. I hope we can continue it.
Well, excellent. I think we can call it a close. And as John said, we had a dinner now, and for the online audience, what's left. So I hope you enjoyed it as well, and that next time you can join in person. That would be wonderful. And we have a table at 7:30, but we can be there already at 7 at the Capitol Park, which is walking distance, 5 minutes. Maybe it's like that. Around where the Hilton is. Well, you're invited, right? To join. And from my side, yeah, we can continue discussion. So I'm very happy with the output. And yeah, everything else then in the
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Yes, thanks very much, all of you that are online. Thank you for sticking with us.
Enjoy your dinner.